Welcome back to the second video of our U.S. Enrollment Strategy series. In this session, we explore how European universities can improve enrollment growth through smart positioning, targeted marketing, and strategic alignment. Hope you enjoy.
We're just going to start with level one. These are some basics. A few of you have already seen some of this. Level one's really important to do. Actually, it's really important to do every 2 to 3 years. What I notice is it can be really confusing for them. Sometimes the wrong lingo is used. Sometimes I have to dig around a lot to find information, or the comm stream's really clunky. When you implement these are easy and affordable wins. This will really help you when you get a student in the door or to your site to make sure you can keep them in the loop. So how well do you know USA lingo? So I'm going to give you some common faux amis that happen often. So study abroad in Europe can mean either Erasmus or it can mean doing your full degree somewhere else. Now, in the US, study abroad really only means a semester abroad. So Erasmus would be the equivalent, right? But students get confused if you use study abroad when in fact you're talking about a full degree abroad, right? A full undergrad degree abroad or a full master's program abroad. All right, another common faux amis is accommodations. In Europe, like 100% of the time, accommodations means housing. Now, sometimes in the US, that means housing too. But in an educational setting, accommodations actually means those special supports, those legal special supports for disabilities. So for example, if I have a learning difference, I will request accommodations. I'm not requesting housing. I am requesting special assistance that is legal, I can access legally. So instead, make sure you're using with students housing dorms and accommodations. Be sure to you can use to talk about special disability supports. Course, depends what country you're in here, but many US students and families get very confused on that. So major or program creates a little more clarity. Postgraduate, most have no idea what that is. Graduate and masters. Open days, most US students have no idea what that means. Tours or visits. And here's a few just communication basics here. One thing I think is super interesting and very different from Europe is US students start researching universities usually their sophomore year. So that's grade 10. And that is a 9 to 24-month university research phase before application. So it's really important to be able to play the long game here and have a lot of communications to keep your institution top of mind for that 9 to 24-month period. Here's some content that matters to US students and parents. Safety, I think, is very important. For example, Ireland, I think, is number 2 in the world for peace and safety. And so being able to talk in language of like what it's like and how safe the communities are. But I mean, all of Europe is going to be a whole heck of a lot safer than the US. So how are you going to talk about that? How do you talk about learning differences and how you support them through accommodations? Talk about tuition savings, student life. Finally, do not say easy admissions process. I never want to see that. Basically, that connotes you've got poor quality. And so if you are test optional, and some of you are out there, or if, you don't require AP scores or don't require SATs, and you sort of look at the whole student, what you're going to use, the sexy word to use is to say, we have a holistic admissions process. Parents and students' ears perk up if that's you. And if you don't have a US landing page, I suggest you put one together. Um, and if you do, just double check that all these components are on your US landing page. And I realize some of you have really complicated, like there's different prices and it's hard to capture it all. Like I get it. But is there a way to, it doesn't have to be comprehensive, but it has to be concise. So for example, easy reference to cost. I do not want to see any charts, no complications, no math. I saw a study in Ireland had a general landing page for US students, and here's what they did, right? So they have a lot of universities. And so they said something like tuition generally ranges, and they changed it to dollars, generally ranges from, I think it was like 15,000 US dollars to 26,000 US dollars, right? So they just gave a range. So you want to highlight also your programs in English. Doesn't have to be comprehensive, but just make sure you're letting students know all of these are in English. You want a quick reference to admissions requirements. Don't make them dig too hard. Now you can, it doesn't have to be comprehensive. There can be a link that takes you there, but is there a sentence that says something like, we do holistic admissions, or we require SAT scores of blah, 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 and 3 APs, something like that. Accreditation and ranking, something that makes sense to a US audience. So I saw Colette from University College Cork enter the room. And so I'm going to give a great example here. So University College Cork ranks I think it's 246 in the latest QS rankings. You may be aware that I would say 95% of US families have zero idea what QS or times higher ed. They've never heard of it. It means nothing. So what you're going to do is translate that in US. So Colette, here's what you're going to do. You're going to say, we have the same ranking as Dartmouth. Dartmouth is 247. All families know who Dartmouth is. And so this immediately tells them, this is who we are. Accreditation can be something simple like we're accredited through the Ministry of Education in X country, and this degree is transferable back to the US. Boom. You want to have something around disability supports and accommodations, not housing. Here I'm talking about what are those special disability supports. And then have a separate one for housing/dorms, if you have access to that. And you want a simple button or some way, doesn't have to be live, to connect with a US student, and a button for virtual or in-person tours. If people are having to search around for an email to email you to set up a tour, you're just going to lose people. So do this. I mean, once you create this, it gives a lot of information really quickly to students so they can see if it's going to be a good match. So here's your to-do list. I want you to train your admissions team, social media team, marketing team regarding the use of US lingo and common questions, FAFSA, 529, 504, IEPs, etc. I want you to tag US students and parents, possible, in your CRM and start to develop a communication stream. Obviously, there can be overlap with some of your other communication streams, but start to use some US lingo and plan for content. Develop a long-term approach to sales. Stop communications that begin and end with apply now. Often I will, because I said there's this long cycle of research US students are doing, and so make sure that your first email to them is apply now. That's just not going to work. Okay, so we've just sort of gone over quickly some level 1 stuff. This needs to be done every 2 to 3 years. Now we're we're going to get into level 2. So this is really fun. And this will start to help you define your strategy. So there's a lot of things in level 2. This is just a few highlights. We're just going to do the first bullet. But what we're going to work on is establishing your USP. That stands for your unique selling proposition. And from there, we're going to take your unique selling proposition, and by that I mean your unique selling proposition in the US, and we're going to create your US student avatars. Once you've got your avatars, then you can start to target your plan. And part of that will be finding US rainmakers, selecting databases, working on a marketing plan. Remember, there are no agents. Now, level 2 does require some more investment, but it's worth it. All right, so I'm going to put up some questions. Also, get out a pen and paper, and I want you to look over this list. This is not a comprehensive list. There can be way more things than I have. But what I want you to do is to consider your institution and what are these unique selling propositions for a US market. So are you cost effective? I mean, because everything's expensive in the US, anything $20K in dollars a year or less for tuition is cost effective, which is crazy. Do you accept FAFSA, 529, GI Bill? Do you have a high ranking? And remember, you're using a US reference here, but this can become this then will define what type of student you're looking for. And if you don't have a high ranking, don't worry about it. There are other unique things about you. So it doesn't matter really what's on here, it's what will work for you and then figuring out your avatars from there. Do you have a desirable location? Unique academic programming in English. The next one's super important. If you have internships, practicums, study abroad, and here I'm talking about like Erasmus, and then also your employability. What types of support systems are in place for students, right? Do you shine with disability support, health and wellness, academic support? If you're a smaller, more nimble institution, I know some of you out there are, this is probably where you shine, right? You have solid supports for students. You've got more one-on-one contact. Student life. Do you have dedicated dorms? This is really important at the undergrad level. Do you have student programming and sports? I realize sports is not as common, at least the way it's organized in the US, but I think it's a selling point. So if you have club sports, like that can be a selling point. And are you test optional? That is also a selling point. No SATs or AP scores. So this is not comprehensive, but I'd like you just to write down like the top, 3 to 5 that jump out at you from a US perspective. And then from there, once you've got your top 3 to 5, I'm going to give you an example of some avatars. This is a client that I'd worked with, and this client did not have any rankings, right? So they're not like going to be that high ranking. They offer holistic admissions. They're test optional. They have really good more supports for students, both academic, disability, and mental health. So what we did, and they're super affordable, I should say. They're only $12,000 a year in tuition, so that's free by US standards. So what we do then is I map out which of your avatars are aligned with your unique selling proposition. Now, each of these avatars is going to have a different strategy. So where you're going to find that student who cares about cost is probably could be different than holistic admissions. And it's definitely different than a student who wants to find a program, in this case, the Czech Republic, and it's a heritage student, right? So that strategy for heritage students really different. Your cost savvy student strategy is really different on holistic admissions. So basically, then you start, once you've got your avatars, you can start to do some precision targeting in regards to which high schools you're targeting, or in the case if you're doing you're trying to attract masters, which universities you're targeting, as well as how you do any of your promotions, how you do all the relationships with IECs, and which states you're attending. And then it also informs your marketing plan as well. And so part of what we do is we can also help you with that strategy. We help you figure out who your US avatars are and help you define your strategy.
It'll be basically just a continuation of what you said, Denise, regarding market segmentation, really knowing your client or knowing your student or your prospective student and what motivates them to study in your university and specifically what course, or what path. And this would be, going down the line with market segmentation, referring to the avatars, program positioning, more leaning towards specific degrees that are popular within that avatar group. And then trust architecture, more in referring to when Denise was talking about, what accreditation they have, with QS, or what accreditation is required by that significant student within that market segment, because it is important. So in the strategic marketing plan, basically we wanted to break it down into foundation, more of the root of the kind of root motivation for students studying, and then once we find out exactly what that is, how to execute that, and how to align that with your specific university timelines, and making sure that that matches, that's in line, and also channel prioritization. How under what specific channels, what specific groups to really market your university, sponsor consideration, which is really who's paying for the program, their school, whether it's a scholarship funded, or the parents, or actually the students themselves. That's actually a good question to ask, and it'll help model your marketing plan as to how to get in front of that student, and how to convince that student to enroll in your institution. So.
Great. Thanks, Carlos. And
Mhm.
I'll just say, like, probably many of you experience, the US is so big and probably feels overwhelming. And it's like, how do I even crack this code? And usually what I encounter is, it feels overwhelming. People try a few things. Let me try a Google ad. Let me try this. And, it's like throwing spaghetti on the wall and then hoping something sticks. So our approach is really just to get a little smarter about it and create these student avatars so you can dial in all the components for how you're trying to talk. So I'll go back to this. Let me just go back. I want to show you this university that I worked with, and they didn't have a high ranking, and that's okay. Um, but they had these other strengths. And one of the things I think that was important is the previous strategy is they were, trying to attract students who cared about rankings, not realizing like, okay, that we're having different conversations. So don't we need to let go of that and focus in these other areas. And so what we're suggesting is the more you can get precision with your ideal student, I call them avatars, you can call them profiles. This is a smart way. I know all of you have limited resources, limited budget. You cannot do the entire United States. It is impossible. And so you have to be smart about how you approach the US market.
Yep.
Um,
And just
and
to add,
oh, yeah, go on.
sorry, Denise, I just asked one thing because there was a question that came up a couple times in the chat, whether we're talking about just undergrad or grad students, because I know we talked about in the past that they're different.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when I studied in Spain, I was a grad student. I had different motivations and a different history, which led me to study in the school that I was. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of touch on that or just leave it toward the Q&A towards the
Yeah,
end.
no, I think thanks for that clarification. Yeah, I mean, you need some of you will be doing only undergrad, some will be doing only master's programs, some of you are looking at both, depending on who your institution is. I will say what works at the undergrad level is not going to work at this master's level. So you actually, once you've identified your avatars and sort of looking at yeah, you could have like a holistic admissions at undergrad or at master's, but the strategy associated with undergrad and master's is very different in the US, not even remotely the same. Um, and so that's also part of when we start dialing it in, paying attention to masters and yeah, and I have more to say. I'm trying to like figure out how best to what to share, what not to share. Um, I hope that answers. We also can help with. I know, like I said, many of you have limited budgets, so some things to think about is: are there partnerships that with sort of sharing, cost sharing with like-minded institutions? I know some of you are sort of all artsy programs. So is there a way to sort of create sort of working with us so you don't have to like spend all your budget on this, but are there ways to cost share? And we're happy to help you think that through. Also happy to, think through other things like we do something called University of the Month for US students and families. We also do something helping with webinars. So there can be different things we can help with targeting your audience. The next slide is just a little video. Carlos, you want to say anything about it before?
No, I think it's a work in progress. It's a sneak peek to something that we're currently working on. So we wanted to kind of show you what that looks like.
Think about this, like you can't reach all students. It's too big. So you're going to be paying attention to rainmakers. Rainmakers are not agents like you would be using in Turkey or China or India. Rainmakers are going to be your particular high schools, or if you're a master's, if you specialize in master's programs, you're going to be looking at depends on the institution, but career offices at universities. You're not going to look at high schools, you're going to look at career offices at universities in the US. You're also going to be looking at IECs. IECs work primarily at undergrad, but they also do master's programs. So you want to have an IEC. These are independent educational consultants. You want to have them in your corner and that they know who you are. And then some of you also will select US databases depending on your institution. Some of these could be anything from the Common App to other US databases. Honestly, I find study.eu way easier to navigate than the US databases because they're really geared for a US system. But there are a couple out there that I think are really worth it. And that requires more investment. Finally, level 3, right? So I know a number of you on the call have some of this. You have FAFSA approval and you've got your FAFSA process. You've got your know how to talk to families about 529 plans. For those of you who don't know what that is, these are, because US costs so much money from birth, then some families set up these savings plans to start saving for their child's education at birth. And so these are tax-free plans. So that's what that is, which is insane to me. And then some of you also have US staff. And so these are all very sizable investments. These are sustained investments. FAFSA process actually doesn't take long. It's the compliance part that is really hard. So some of you may have all of these fancy level 3 things, but I'd say reflecting and looking back, do you have the right level 1 and level 2 things also in place? All right, so here's your to-do list for the next 9 months. Now these are bigger. We just did a little overview today in regarding assessing your unique selling proposition for the US market and then creating your US avatars. And then dialing that in. Who are your best rainmakers? Where will you find them based on your US avatars? And then aligning your marketing strategy based on your US avatars as well. We can help with that. You can also do this on your own, but just wanted to make sure that you have a roadmap so you sort of know where you're headed. So some convenient next steps. We both offer together or individually, we offer free consult. And this is just a chance for you to explain, like, all right, here's what's going on. Here's, our main challenges. Here's what I would like to see. And here's our budget, right? And then it's just a chance to sort of brainstorm and see, like, all right, is this something that we can impact or help? And I like to say, like, I know you have limited budgets. I get that. And US market may not be as top of mind as some other markets. But if this is something you would like to grow, just set up a free call. It's like no big deal. And then what we'll do based on your needs, we come up with a proposal. And then assuming that works, then there's an implementation phase. And every institution is unique, so there isn't a one size fits all. That's my information. It's Denise at affordabledegreesabroad.com. There's Carlos's information as well. And we would love just to hear what your needs are and to see what can happen.